Panel on aircraft leasing and financing. Vicky has kindly requested me to moderate this panel. So maybe what I will do is I'll try and give you a quick intro on our esteemed panel here, and then we'll start with some questions. I believe the format is I'm going to ask some questions, have a general discussion, and then we'll leave it open to the audience here. And once we have done that, feel free to raise your hands and we can maybe try and take some questions. Welcome to the session. I hope you all enjoy it. It's right after lunch, so please try to keep up. I'm going to go a little low tech here and read out what notes I have on the panel. On my left is Mr. Prakash Rao, Executive Director and CIO for NIIF. Next to him, Mr. Simran Singh Tiwana, CEO, Star Air. Mr. Dipesh Shah is there next. He's the Executive Director, Development of IFSCA. And Mr. Rashri Sen is sitting next to him. He's the CFO and Senior VP Leasing of Viman Aviation Services, IFSC Private Limited. And then we have Mr. Vasuki Prasad, Sales Director, APAC, Embraer, who's coming all the way from Singapore to join us for this panel. Welcome, all of you. So glad to be there on the same panel with everyone. Okay, I am, just so that those of you who don't know me, I'm the Chairman and CEO of Acumen Aviation. We also have an entity in IFSC, and this is why I'm in this panel, because that's pretty much our business, aircraft leasing and financing. So I'll start with some questions I have here for the panel. Maybe I'll go around, ask some general questions, and also some questions which are directed to some of you specifically. I think I would have hoped that we will have, I think Dipesh ji will start with you. Since you are in a way representing the Indian government, you're from IFSCA, and you also have played a major role in bringing IFSC initiative in India and the whole aircraft leasing and platform. So I think there is a question to reflect on. Maybe this is something you can throw some light on, and maybe we can request then one or two more panelists to speak about that. Now, the first question on the top of my mind, when this panel was put together, was what's happening in the rest of the world. So without mincing any words, like the whole Russia-Ukraine affair, Russia is invading Ukraine. We know what is happening. Aircraft leasing is in news as well. So are other industries. So question I have is, in the background of the current war or the wars going on in the world, the real war as well as the commercial war, what relevance do we attach to self-reliance in aircraft leasing and financing? I think maybe this is something, Dipesh, you can take, please.
Thank you, Alok. At the outset, I must thank the Ministry of Civil Aviation and the FICCI for organizing this very important aircraft leasing conference today, where we all are participating. I think this is the most appropriate time, as Alok rightly pointed out. Globally also, there are a lot of issues going on. And back of that, having a physical conference here and having large opportunities in the aviation sector, I think it's a great time to hold this, because when there are challenges, the opportunities equally comes forward during those time. Let me give 30 seconds quickly for the benefit of the audience. The initiative of the Government of India at the International Financial Services Center at GIFT City in India, at Gujarat. What government did is identified a zone in India and notified it as an offshore zone. So you are part of India, but that zone, for all practical and regulatory purposes, has been declared as an offshore zone. It is similar to setting up a company in Singapore, Dubai, Mauritius, or any island anywhere else. So it's a part of the zone. When you set up a company there, you become a non-resident from an Indian foreign exchange regulation perspective. Two, at the same time, it gives you an ability to start understanding from the business perspective as to what all businesses which have gone outside India, just for the want of not having our own International Financial Services Center, as to how do we bring back those business and jobs to India. And this, I think, at the backdrop of the Atmanirbhar Bharat, what we are seeing, it becomes very relevant, that because you not having your own global financial center, People found it much more efficient, maybe Ireland, maybe Singapore, Dubai, to set up companies there and do transactions for India. But with the setting up of the International Financial Services Center in India, I think the message is very loud and clear for all the industry that we now have a center for all practical purpose. You can go to that center, and whether you had, whether it's your banking requirements, your dollar requirements for insurance, your leasing requirement, everything in that zone is similar to what you get from an offshore financial center. With this, Alok, if I come back to your question, I think I personally believe this is a very appropriate time to discuss about how do we set up a leasing industry in India. And because of being reliant, maybe at 98, 99, 100% we were reliant on Ireland, Singapore and others for leasing to Indian airlines, it is time that we start participating. So what government did was, I think in the February 2021, and this was on the backdrop of starting a leasing venture in India, a framework was issued. And if I see in 1 year time from that framework to till date, when we started, everybody said that it is not possible in India to set up an aircraft leasing structures. It is not possible that you will get companies here to lease into India because the Ireland has a very good double tax avoidance treaties with the world. There are a lot of tax benefits that they are offering. The regulations are much more light touch, and the industry is flourishing over a period of time there, and it would be very difficult for India to replicate. So if I answer your question from that perspective as to 1 year from where we started in February 2021 and where we are in 2022, what has happened is we have lessors close to 15 lessors already licensed in the IFFC zone. These are IFFC based Indian lessors listed as a lessor for leasing into India and to the globally. We already leased 2 aircraft from an IFFC zone to India. And our one of the largest deal is happening on Monday, coming Monday, which is the largest $50 million deal happening from that zone, which is again proving that it is possible through a regulatory and various measures to set up such structures in the IFFC zone and make India self-reliant when it comes to the aircraft leasing and financing. So I'll go with a optimistic approach that it is possible. And if everyone works together, the stakeholders, the industry, the government, we have seen in last 1 year, I think the industry players are there, government has fully supported, all the tax incentives have been offered, and we have become par with what is happening in Ireland. So if you can get aircraft lease from Ireland, I can tell you very confidently, you will find the similar structures, tax-wise and regulation-wise, available in IFFC in India, where you will be able to lease into India.
Thank you, Dipesh. Okay, so my next question, is I think the gentleman sitting next to me, Mr. Rao. I think this is an area of where you can throw some light. Role of funding institutions. We know, just to reveal, we started our panel discussions before we even stepped on the panel. Mr. Rao was there, and we all took the liberty to take his time. So maybe something you can throw a light on, Mr. Rao, that what role do you see funding institutions, like NIIF is one of the biggest funds in India today for infrastructure. So I'm not going to ask you what role you see NIIF playing right now. I don't want you to say things which you maybe cannot reveal in public, but in general, what funding institutions, banks' role in aircraft leasing and financing you see, given your background in banking, funding. And if, okay, maybe this is a question for later, maybe some audience may ask it or I may ask it again later, that if anyone can reveal any plans also here later. But maybe you can tell us first your perspective on this.
Yeah, thank you, Alok. And first of all, thank you, Vicky, for having me here. When I feel I'm a little of a outsider to this whole panel, because we are essentially an investor in infrastructure assets. Okay, the National Investment and Infrastructure Fund, it's conceived by the. I'll just tell maybe a couple of minutes on how the NIIF itself has been structured. This has been conceptualized by the government with the idea of crowding in international capital into the Indian infrastructure space. Now, we are about 4 years into operations, and we have actually been able to get some wonderful world-class international investors into the NIIF. So now the mandate of NIIF is not just investment in infrastructure, it is national investment and infrastructure. So they expect, the authors of NIIF, they expected us to invest in areas which are of national importance. And I think aircraft leasing is definitely one of national importance. And the IFSCA has done yeoman service. Actually, last 2-3 years, the amount of work that has been done in bringing the aircraft leasing industry on a par with Ireland, I think it has been phenomenal. Okay. Maybe like Deepesh mentioned, 2 years back, if I have attended one conference on aircraft leasing, and I thought maybe it will be a little too early for us to think of aircraft leasing. But now I think definitely there is a opportunity for people to set up aircraft leasing business in India. And to the point that Alok mentioned, whether there is a role that is played by funding institutions, I think funding institutions definitely have to take the lead, because if you want to set up an industry, if you want to set up an ecosystem, it is not just one person or one institution that can take the lead. Of course, institutions like NIIF would definitely try and take the lead on this. But I think the ability for us to really bring in, crowd in international capital is what helps us in really making this a great success. In my view, I think for an institution like NIF to start on a smaller scale may not really be what would be the ideal way. We think that whenever we get into something, we have to have a long-term business plan, and if we are able to get to a 200 aircraft or 300 aircraft position, that is when we really have made a difference. We have built the ecosystem. We have, while IFSCA has done a lot of work, the Indian institutions have to take the lead and building the ecosystem. The legal ecosystem needs to be built, and the technical knowledge. And we need a lot of HR to be developed within the country. I think the Indian institutions, particularly, and the investment institutions and funds. In addition to that, the local banks. I have been talking to a few local banks, and all of them have expressed a keen desire to fund the aircraft leasing business. I think we need to create the framework for that. And in my opinion, it would be a great thing if Indian institutions participate. And like the earlier question also, is it the right time for us to be a little Atmanirbhar on the aircraft leasing business? I think this is the time. That's with that, I hand it back.
Thank you, sir. So, okay, Mr. Rao, what you have mentioned is, I agree that our own banks and our own capital has to participate if India has to grow in this industry, and we cannot just rely on foreign capital. I think we should move on to a little bit more interesting point from there on, and maybe I will like to ask Simran. Simran, you're the CEO of Star Air. So it's very important for the audience to know what has been your experience. You have, I'm sure, and please allow me some liberty here, you must have interacted with banks, funding institutions so far, and you may be still doing it. So what do you think, first of all, what's your experience been? Please try and be as candid as you can. And then tell us, what do you think needs to happen for you to get more airplanes funded and bring and grow your business? Please.
Thank you, Alok. Firstly, thank you, Afiki and Ministry of Civil Aviation for having us all here in this important panel regarding leasing and financing. Very interesting things have been happening around this backdrop of a war which is happening and affecting the entire aviation business worldwide has definitely sparked interest of all airlines to have some local ecosystem which can be shielded to a certain extent within the country. We are recovering really fast as airlines to get back to our pre-pandemic numbers. With the load factors going up, the fuel prices have again gone out of anybody's imagination. So if we have a structure which the government is planning, and if we can have the financial institutes supporting this infrastructure, this IFSCA, I think all airlines are interested in it. We have a couple of times interacted with some local banks, and the appetite of the banks or the understanding of the airline business at the bank level has always been a challenge. We have some borrowing locally. We have done. We have purchased 5 aircrafts, Embraer aircrafts with local funding, and this was pre-pandemic. And they understood us, but more on a broader level of a group of who we were, but not as an airline startup. So there are challenges which we discussed with a lot of banks. Bank of Baroda and Union Bank of India were very accommodative, and they did understand the business plan, and we were impressed when they looped in some very senior aviation experts internationally while processing our fund request. So it is already happening. Now, moving it to the GIFT City infrastructure will need maybe some startup projects. 2 have already happened, and I'm happy Mr. Dipesh sharing that there's another announcement being happening on Monday. I think that is how it would be led before the airlines start pulling in their leases out of the GIFT City. And we are very keen. We were just discussing that we all need to plan a visit there and see how we can plan our future leases within the GIFT City.
I have a follow-up question for you. So you, and this is more of a general question, but I think you're best placed to answer it in the panel. So Star Air is also, I think, if I may use the word beneficiary of RCS scheme, which is great for the aviation industry. A lot of airlines in Indian aerospace as aviation have benefited. I would like to know what are your thoughts, and I think this is something I want to open to the panel. Maybe Dipesh ji can also chip in a bit there, and Rajshri, you can also maybe give your thoughts then. Would like to know that one of the things which we have been discussing for a while is that if the RCS scheme is over there, which is basically the taxpayer offering subsidy to the airlines, we feel that there should be a mechanism which should be linked to aircraft leasing through IFSC when the airplanes are operating through the RCS model. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think, firstly, it supports the business model very well. So any lessor looking at an airline having a backup of a UDAN network definitely brings more to the table. So that already happens. And I think that's more for the lessors to say what else can be done, tweaked to make them more comfortable. But to answer your question, the RCS UDAN scheme gives the business plan a longevity, a financial support, and gives you the initial exclusivity of 3 years. That also helps. So the entire business model has a lot more chances of success with the UDAN, and in turn, the entire development of the country in terms of connecting a Tier 3 and a Tier 2 city, which we are doing. We started with 1 aircraft, we are flying 5 aircrafts, and we are connecting to 16 different stations in India. And probably we are the only airline with 5 planes connecting 16 stations. So we are able to do that just because of UDAN. And we are able to plan a growth based on the scheme. Yeah.
So if I may put you in a little spot, you're saying that you are in agreement that linking it to the IFSC-based leasing makes sense?
Yes, it does.
Thank you.
I would say that, yes, it does.
Thank you. Rashri, you want to?
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. In order to understand the the leasing model, that what we have been trying to do is also to appreciate the fact that local leasing companies need to get some kind of incentive when operating out of India, because the risks are paramount. We have kind of put our business in a situation where there are people who are competing with us who have been ahead almost 30 to 40 years as far as the leasing business goes. So two things I would want to point out. One is when you mentioned about the RCS, I think one good broad incentive that can actually be given to companies or the NSOPs is to waive off the customs duty for the NSOPs, so that they're able to get competitive and get more aircrafts on the NSOP, which is also part of the RCS.
Sorry, you're referring to BCD, just for the benefit of the audience.
Yeah, the BCD, yes, correct.
Okay.
So what that would help us to get more people on the 9-seater to 19-seater aircrafts, and that typically would help in a lot of enhancing, incentivize the NSOPs to start coming and looking at domestic leasing companies, and that typically will be a little bit of an edge that we can actually get over the global leasing companies. And I think that should be a little bit of, we all understand that as far as the financing goes, and I think just to digress from the question what you had asked, if I've answered that, a little bit of incentive as far as the taxes goes, and I think we're all working towards leveraging to get the 2% withholding taxes off from the leasing that is done through India. But otherwise, if I were to put it, the fact that the Indian system or the RCS is something which we are very keen at, and if you see what we have done is to lease 2 aircrafts, 2 ATR 72-600s to a local airline in India, which has also started doing the leasing, which has also started running the connectivity between Guwahati and now in Hyderabad, and the third aircraft is also coming very shortly. And what it also gives us is a very effective use of the RCS money that is getting. The only thing what we would have wished was that if there was the Indian financing available on those,
We all wish that.
the dollar would have actually stayed within the country. But having said that, I think it adds a lot of value as far as connectivity goes. The IFSCA regulated leasing companies, the better part is that today we've got smaller operators who don't have access to the milestones of the world coming and talking about aircraft leasing to us. And in a way, I think is helping to build up the whole ecosystem about leasing in India. And I think while there are a lot of steps that needs to be covered as part of the leasing and financing part, but I think we have taken very, very nice steps in order to come up speed as far as leasing of aircrafts is concerned.
I do intend to ask you a question, but maybe we can revisit this in a few minutes about your overall experience also, to elaborate a bit more. Dipesh, I'll come back to you. Just I want to get Vasuki in the discussion. So Vasuki, you represent Embraer, an OEM. We know that OEMs are normally not directly involved in financing, though they have mechanisms, like I believe Embraer used to have ECC leasing as a mechanism, right? So if I may just request if you can give your thoughts on what role do you think an OEM can play in the financing ecosystem, and if you can maybe give a general perspective and also specific to India, that will be very helpful. Please.
Surely. Thanks a lot, Alok, and thanks to the ministry, and thanks to Fiki for making this possible. So Embraer is the only regional jet manufacturer in the world today, and the world's third largest aircraft manufacturer after the other 2 more popular names that you may see up on the board of sponsors. Before going there, I think with the whole RCS scheme, what it probably isn't just taxpayers' money, because whether it's a taxpayer or not a taxpayer, somebody who's even a foreigner flying on a domestic ticket, a cut of his ticket goes into the RCS fund. So
of course. I didn't mean it that way.
Absolutely. I just meant to say that even
Yes.
the outsiders are taxed, not just the taxpares on the RCS, which is fantastic. And before moving on to what we can do for financing, just on the RCS and its role for financing, right? The one thing that leasing in India, the first thing that comes to mind is how mature is this, which obviously is good, but it's yet to prove and mature, right? And with that, you have risk involved. How will this pan out? The most amazing thing with RCS is you have guaranteed revenue coming into an airline. And when you have guaranteed revenue coming into an airline, you can use that guaranteed revenue to actually reduce the risk component in leasing, making it a lot more attractive to investors who want to get into leasing in India. And the best part is the regional aviation segment in India, and I say this as a regional aircraft manufacturer or representing a regional aircraft manufacturer, has had its fair share of issues. And if I may be so bold as to say, almost all regional airlines in India have shut. And this is not to do with the fact that it's a regional airline. There are certain challenges to this. And what has really thrown a lifeline to regional connectivity is the regional connectivity scheme. Because it does help overcome a lot of challenges to make the regional aircraft model and the regional airplane model really sustainable. In India today, your connectivity mostly between tier 1, tier 1, tier 1, tier 2 are catered to by most of the big airlines, but you still do have a lot of gaps, especially in tier 2 to tier 2 connectivity. Now, the only operators who may really and effectively cater to this tier 2 to tier 2 connectivity are regional operators, like our esteemed customer out here, Star Air. And if you want to tap into connecting real India, as says Star Air, which is something that even we believe in, you need regional aircraft. And that is where I see IFSCA coming in, because among all airplanes that are available, the more affordable aircraft or the least expensive aircraft are the regional aircraft. And in fact, I think Viman has gotten into the transaction, as you did say, with the turboprop aircraft, which are also regional aircraft. So it doesn't matter who the aircraft manufacturer is, one of the first airplanes that should come under the purview of IFSCA should be the regional aircraft. For many factors. One is it's something that is a lot more affordable, plus you already have a very strong set of lessors already established for larger aircraft. But it's the regional aircraft that do want or need this kind of financing. And besides the RCS scheme, which really makes regional connectivity sustainable. Now, we all talk about sustainability, right? I really believe the most important and the need of the hour is not the sustainability that we look at in terms of being green and carbon offsets. It's about financial sustainability. And airlines have always had a challenge with financial sustainability, but it's the RCS scheme that makes the regional operator model sustainable. But then it's not just RCS, because RCS is a fantastic policy, but it does not cater to every issue that faces any operator in India today. The other one is on the cost. And on the cost, you have operating cost, which comes from our aircraft, and you have ownership cost, which may or may not come totally from the aircraft manufacturer. Like, for example, the leasing cost. The cost that you are charged to lease the airplane comes from the lessor. And this is where I really see IFSCA having a very, very fantastic role to play. A gift city-based lessor can be a great vehicle for investors wanting to invest in airplane as an asset, reap benefits from the amazing benefits that are offered by Gift City, and the difference between the benefits that they get just because you have it in the Gift City and what they need to attain as their return on investment margins can be passed on to the lessee or the regional operator in this case as a lease rate which effectively is below typical market values.
Right. Vasuki, I'm going to stop you there for a quick minute. So you're right, what you're saying. Having said that, what I would like to, maybe if you can elaborate on the piece that, see, as an OEM, you do facilitate financing at times.
We do.
Right? So have you managed to have a chat with your financing partners? And do you see there is a possibility that you may be able to get them interested in the IFSC Gift City as a location where they may be able to provide financing. Because as you must have heard Mr. Sen there, that's what he said, that he wishes Indian capital was available, by which I think it translates to easy capital and ease of access to capital. So, having said that, do you think with your financing partners you can incentivize them or at least facilitate that process to help?
We have some education to do. We need to educate
Okay.
those on the outside. We need to help educate banks on the inside. And more than that, everything in this world is driven by risk or the perception, the risk perception. And I'm really happy with what Viman has done with the turboprop airplanes, because that has started to show traction and credibility, and I'm sure even Acumen will get into them eventually in course of time. While we can do whatever we need to do, at the end of the day, it is action that speaks. And once it's proven and there is that reduced risk perception, automatically everything starts coming in. And we are very keen on supporting Acumen, Viman, and anybody else that does come up in helping make this possible. It's a great thing you have going, but I still feel it's yet untapped. And when it really is tapped, there's so much more to happen.
Okay, then let us go back to Dipeshji here. Dipeshji, you have heard almost everyone in the panel now. You have since, and I know you gave us a very good summary in the very beginning, but if you can, if I can ask you a specific question about what key initiatives you think going forward you have in the pipeline, and what are the remaining, maybe another way to ask it is, what are the remaining stumbling blocks in the whole process? Because you are very proactive, I know personally. You have been talking to all the stakeholders, including us, regularly, and you may be the best person to tell us how you're going to remove them and what are they, you know.
Thank you, Alok, and thank you for taking up the cause of bringing in the IFFC, even in the RCS, saying that, you know, as a part of the initiative, this can be brought in. But I think a lot of credit first should go to the ministry which started this. The Ministry of Civil Aviation took the Rupee Raftar report at the time. Nobody thought that, you know, your 1,000 aircraft going to be purchased into India in next 10 years and you need $50 billion to come here, which means every year $5 billion needs to be funded to this aircraft. And that, I believe, is a starting point, which everybody at that point of time, nobody thought that it is possible through this report that, you know, we can do so much in India. But having done the hard work and then followed up with all the steps that the government has taken, whether it was the taxation changes, and some of the very specific to airlines have come first time in India, like giving the capital gain exemption. Where the aircraft is sold, there is no tax. When there is a withholding tax exemption, there is a 10-year tax holiday been brought in. Out of 10 years, there is no tax on a leasing arm operating in IFFC. These were the steps, I think, were unprecedented in terms of the way the government has taken up this cause now. And I would go other way. When you say that instead of putting this, it should be other way, saying that if everything is at par versus us versus outside, why not we utilize our own financial center to satisfy our international financial services needs? And if there are challenges, I think everybody, have you seen all the stakeholders across, I think everybody has been forthcoming and trying to resolve the issues at every step. I know where you are coming from. You are saying, you know, as what are the last steps now in terms of getting this sorted out in terms of the airlines or the aircraft coming on ground. I think what I said is, you know, all the steps taken till date has brought us to a stage that you have 15 lessor now. They are envisaging by in 22, 23, close to 30 aircraft between them. These are all small, big, you know, all numbers, all types of aircrafts, helicopters, head taxi, all been envisaged there. Having come to this stage, I think there are 2-3 important steps which are required. One, obviously, when the aircraft comes in, the process to get the aircraft custom cleared through an SEZ is one which we are working with the Ministry of Commerce, and we've been seeing that, you know, in the couple of aircraft which came in, there is always challenge because it is first time in happening in India. Nobody has done this transaction before. So every stage you have to go and explain as to what is going to happen, why is it happening this way, why it was not done in India before. So those are, we believe it's a part and parcel of any new industry which comes up in any part of the world. We have to educate, we have to keep talking to the stakeholders. But having done that, I think the process, if it is well defined in terms of getting the aircraft on ground, would help the entire industry, which is envisaging another 20, 30 transactions to happen from here on. Two, I think the financing which is coming up is one of the important points, and thanks that NIIF is here. Players like them, players like SBI, players like Bank of Baroda, they are the one. If they decide, I don't think there is a challenge that we can't replicate what Ireland has done so many years back. We can easily do that if we all stand up to the cause of making the aircraft leasing possible in India. And we've seen, as I said, the transactions are happening. Monday, one of the big transactions happening again from the IFFC zone. It's a testimony to the fact that all the systems, whether it is Ministry of Civil Aviation, whether Ministry of Commerce, Ministry of Finance, I think everybody's framework is working hand in hand when it comes to getting the necessary aircraft lease from the IFFC zone. So we are very confident that going forward from now, I think maybe a next year conference, similar time here, you will be surprised to see how many aircrafts have already been done from the IFFC zone. So that's the positive we see from the whole ecosystem now developing in that zone. And it's going to be an ongoing process. We will never be able to say that, we have done this and now everything has to start from tomorrow. The ongoing challenges will keep coming back to us, and we have to address them as we move forward.
Thank you. If I may just add an opinion there. I think the target should be to grow the leasing industry from IFSC, Gujarat, India, to be a global industry, to be able to lease airplanes outside India as well. In fact, this is something which I and Mr. Rao had discussed a while back, that airplanes, we should look at creating aircraft lessors which lease out all over the world. While India can be a proving ground for it, but I think that should be ultimately the aim, and I think that will be really true growth. Rajshri, if I can just ask you one question now before I open to the audience. You have, and congratulations once more, you have managed to structure some transactions now from IFSC. Can you tell us your experience? If you can, and my same request which I made to Simran, try and be as candid as you can be, and give us a perspective, your experience as a lessor in going through this process.
Yeah, thank you, Alok. Let me put the question into a broad framework with three kind of silos. I would want to put first is the regulatory part. So when we talk about regulatory, I think it was fantastic speed. Thanks to the IFSCA, the Gift City Authority, the Ministry of Civil Aviation, the Commerce Ministry. In terms of regulatory, I think they eased the process for us to an extent that while we started out as a proof of concept, hoping that we will try to overcome, and we were met with a positive outlook from every of the departments that we approached. So we had a little bit of an issue, since you asked me to be very candid.
Yes, of
There was a
course.
little issue with the Reserve Bank, but that also got sorted out. And finally, we were able to start the business as per the guidelines, laid down guidelines. Followed by, second part was typically the part of, I would say, the financial part. So when I look at the financial part, I think there was the banking sector in India is still not geared up or has not taken the aircraft leasing business different from the aviation business per se. So when I say this, they still have to cover up the ground to understand aircraft as an asset and not as a working capital. And most of the banks which we have spoken to have started translating the requirement of funding more in terms of how the airlines, and sorry to say that there has been some instances on aviation in India, and banks have aviation as part of the negative list of financing. So it's very difficult to get any financing from the banks. So we again go back and look at funding from outside India, which is typically Europe or maybe the US, and that becomes again a problem because raising capital for an Indian-based leasing company from outside India is always a questionable part, because the foreign institutions themselves start questioning as to why don't you get financing from India.
Yes.
So that is one aspect, and that is what we faced as we've moved along. And the first asset that we bought, the helicopter, was funded through local, our own business accruals and business capital. So we still have miles to cover up in terms of looking at the financing part, which would be the key part as far as the leasing goes. It's very understandable that leasing is a very capital intensive business. And while we all talk about different strategies as far as leasing concerned, we talk about leverage lease, we talk about SPVs, but the primary important are one, the financing, and second part is to get, maybe even if I step one step forward, is to also get these structures incorporated as part of our leasing guidelines and leasing rule book, so that it encourages more openness towards the word leasing. And we also get, it is not merely the lease in its vanilla flavor, but also in terms of understanding the way leases have been set up across globally, and that is what we need to catch up to as far as the third part is something which Dipeshji also stepped upon, was as part of regulatory, where you get the aircraft. So there are a little bit of apprehensions and confusions in terms of understanding which airport, which customs duty, which SEZ, because rules are there, but in terms of understanding. So I think what we are doing on a positive aspect, I would say that we have been progressing stepwise, but the good part is that there has been support everywhere. And we've been able to do 3 transactions today, and everything has met the litmus test as far as the regulatory requirements in India goes. And hoping that as we move forward towards more maturity on the leasing part, it's been just 1 year since we actually actively got the licenses were rolled out. It's precisely going to be 1 year since the whole license rollout happened. And I think in just to put it into perspective, I think when we're talking about almost 6 or 7 leasing already happening out of GIFT City, IFSCA is itself a very proud factor for all of us, because I used to be the CFO in a regional airline earlier, and the question was that why are we not leasing it in India? And within a year, there was a paradigm shift in terms, and here we are. We have the leasing arm in India. We have a whole properly guided leasing facility in India. I think it is only a matter and a factor of time that we are definitely going to catch up. So if just to summarize, I think a lot has been done, and since there are a lot of more people who are joining and understanding the leasing part today, I think in the next couple of years, I think we see a very, very dynamic and a very pretty nice structure of leasing evolving in the country.
From a risk perspective, I think Cape Town Convention Act, I believe, it was circulated in draft form by the Civil Aviation Ministry a while back. I believe that is under review. We are hoping, and I know some of our esteemed colleagues from MOCA are here, and so this is something which will be great if this could be implemented. Cape Town Convention Act will really help reduce the risk, and also the risk management perspective also because that was the issue which happened in the previous, I would say, bankruptcies, airline bankruptcies, where there was no clarity on the enactment, even though the ministry helped a lot, the lessors. I think that.
So when we're in India, typically, if you see the whole setup, what we have, I think domestic leasing companies and domestic aircraft operators won't face the brunt of the regulation, but it always helps overall in the.
Yeah, but if you have foreign funding involved.
Yeah, foreign. Yeah, the only question that goes
exactly.
in is if you're relying on the business from foreign funding, then obviously it becomes very detrimental to the process.
That's where I think that will be helpful. Yeah, thank you. Okay, I think we have managed to keep a good time. We have a few more minutes. I'm very happy to take audience questions. If anyone has any questions for us, please go ahead. You have a mic? Okay, I think we'll let him ask first. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Alok.
Please introduce yourself.
So my name is Anjan Kumar Deveshwar. I am basically aircraft maintenance engineer and instructor. I hold YASA, FA, all the licenses.
Your question is for whom?
My question is to Mr. Deepesh. Like it is very heartening to know, like we all are delighted to know that we are trying to replicate island model, and we have offshore zone like which we have never heard of as of now. So like I wanted to know how we are going to capitalize it for revenue generation and skill development. Like as of now, I will like to tell, like Ireland, they have training institutes also. Like they are offering diploma in aircraft leasing, and Alok's company is also playing a pivotal role, Acumen. So what I believe, government should also have some courses or something they can maybe collaborate with Acumen, so that because the leasing is in nascent stage. So by the time we are full blown, we have manpower also, like which we can supply locally instead of getting the manpower from abroad or other countries. So how do you see we can generate employment and develop skill through this?
Thank you. I think very important question that you have raised. Is any financial center, not only in India, globally, the financial center is only become successful with the skilled manpower available there. You know, without that, no financial centers can operate, and they all face similar challenges. What you have seen in the IFFC zone, I think one is the infrastructure, that you have to lay down to a standard which is obviously matching the global best practices. And if you really come and make a visit to GIFT City, you will see a zone of 800 acres, very dedicated, with an infrastructure created for the first time for financial and IT services as a sector. And I don't want to use this platform to harp upon the infrastructure part of the city, but some of the infrastructure like drinking water from the tap is running in that city since 2013. The entire infrastructure runs on the underground tunnel, no digging of the road in the entire city. There's no garbage van which enters the GIFT City. Everything is automated. So all this, hard work which is required for the infrastructure to come up has been done. If we really see from a financial center perspective, I think three things always are very, very important. One, the regulation, business regulations under which it operates, the tax competitive regime, and the third, which you highlight, the skilled manpower made available. Government in the last union budget has also announced the setting up a foreign university, which will be free from all the domestic regulations, and only one which are provided by the IFFCA, which also is setting the tone of bringing the skill sets available into an IFFC zone. We are glad that people like Acumen, there are a lot of universities across India which have now started programs very specific for IFFC in their syllabus, and we would be welcoming a lot of institutions to come and set up the training center there under the foreign offshore campus also, and the training part also. So I agree with you completely that that's going to be a very important key factor, and we are addressing that in the way the announcements have been done and the steps been taken to bring them on shore in the IFFC zone.
Yeah, great to know that. We thank like government and all of you for taking initiative.
Thank you.
Okay, the gentleman there at the back.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Sanmit Ahuja, and we run an impact entity based out of UK. And we look at a lot of the new sunrise sectors, so electric vehicles, hydrogen, sustainable
Sorry to interrupt you. Your question is for?
The question is for the panel. I'm saying the structures already exists where the new sunrise sector have to bring capital in. We've been able to crack that by partnering with the government and doing equipment leasing and financing, but creating a structure where there's a government entity, whether it's a PSU, a wholesale bank, or someone like an IF, to give me a guarantee wrapper. I cannot take the risk of the industry, right? But I'm happy to take a steady infrastructure type returns. So long as I have a guarantee wrapper available, we are very happy to fund. So we've just struck a deal on EV charging stations. We've just struck a deal on large-scale farming infrastructure. We've just struck a deal on hydrogen from wastewater assets. Same problem, exactly the same problem that you are facing. there's no visibility or predictability on revenues. So, but I'm happy to take an infrastructure return so long as I can find a partner institution which will give me a guarantee wrapper. So I think that the structures already exist.
Okay, so since it was not a question, if it's okay, I will just add couple of bits there. So what I can tell you is, as a stakeholder in the industry, these models are under discussion and review during different forums. These have been discussed, and I can say, if I may just add, that Dipesh ji and his team have been looking at different initiatives in this regard. So this is something, yeah, it's great to know that you are willing to participate. I'm sure there are other industry players who are willing to do that too. So this is under consideration, I know, for sure.
And we do it by partnering with both OEMs and the lessees, right?
That's-
But I
that's-
need an intermediary partner platform in the middle who will give me a wrapper, which...
We should maybe meet today, later, or tomorrow.
I can just add that I think you should have been on this side of the panel rather than on that side. That would help. But we already have an institution called Export Credit Guarantee Corporation, right, licensed in the IFFC zone. And they've been, one of their area which they have taken up is to provide the guarantee for the institutions which are doing business for, which is more export oriented, which is more international financial oriented. So probably I think some of the institutions do exist, and maybe there needs to be more talking between the institutions to figure out the right structure, and we are sure that can be onshore the way that the other industries are also doing. Apart from this, I think I just wanted to add one more area, which is an insurance. When today all this aircraft is being leased from Ireland and other parts of the world, the insurance business is also sitting outside. Because they force the lessors to take insurance from the companies which they have tied up. If you do from a lessor here, and because the IFFC also has an dollar insurance being made available, the entire ecosystem benefit, whether it is banking, insurance, financing, everything is virtually getting onshore in the IFFC versus what is done from outside. And then to his point that this all will bring in the right talent from all perspective.
Yeah. I think Mr. Rao wants to add something.
Yeah, I think we can discuss actually what exactly we can do together. We are a sovereign wealth fund, even if it is quasi-sovereign. I think we can work together on all the areas where we are also working. So maybe we can talk offline.
Okay, yeah, please go ahead.
Hi, I'm Lavjeet from a law firm, Chandok and Mahajan. We work on the aviation side as well. So I have a suggestion probably for Mr. Rao to consider, since they're planning to join this aviation financing space. So we talk about carbon neutral now. Similarly, we are talking about green financing, a transaction which has been undertaken by this Air France. So where this the interest rates are pegged to the environmental compliances to ensure that the aircrafts or the companies are more environmental friendly, and they are moving towards carbon neutral. So that's just a suggestion for finances going forward.
Yeah, see, ENS is something that that's very important for us, and we take all suggestions. And this is something in an aircraft or an aviation sector, how exactly the ENS aspects are being taken care of is one thing that we have always been asking ourselves. But I think, to be fair to the Indian manufacturers, they have actually been able to bring in more and more efficiencies in their engines. And actually, I see that maybe 15 to 20% fuel efficiency has been brought in, and to that extent, they have helped the environment. So we need to look at various ways and means of how exactly the ENS aspects are being taken, and your point is well taken. Thank you.
Thank you.
So Lavjeet, if I can just add there on ESG, as far as the leasing industry is concerned, there is a lot of initiatives going on right now at a global scale where the lessors, the prominent lessors are investing into ESG initiatives. While Air France is a good example, there are a number of other lessors, and they're doing it by two ways. One is the method you mentioned where interest rate is linked to ESG, but then they're also now already investing into new tech. So the drone tech and UAVs investments in the leasing space has already started. and a number of future UAV orders have been placed already, which is also happening mainly because of ESG initiatives. So I'm sure Indian lessors in future will be part of that ecosystem. Any other questions?
Hi, sir.
Please go ahead.
I am Madhu. I run a pilot training company in Hyderabad. So if you have just a number, there are almost 1,000 licenses issued in a year.
Sorry, your question is for whom?
It's basically to Mr. Dipesh.
Okay.
Okay. So, sir, 50% of the pilots are getting trained abroad. Like, say, my company, they train them for the theory and then send them out. And we have a huge requirement for the flying schools in India. And I've been behind IFSC from a long time to establish and get some aircraft for FTOs. Like, I'm sure there's a lot of work done with respect to big commercial aircrafts. But IFSC should seriously consider leasing some aircrafts of small size which are used for training, where the risk is less, the capital involved is less, and we at this sector with respect to pilot training, we can save a lot of fund within India because 50% are getting trained abroad. So I'm seriously wanted you to consider with your entities with IFSC to consider leasing aircraft to flying training schools where the capital is very marginal with respect to.
I think we have players like Viman and others. I'm sure they are looking at this particular because we directly, as an authority, don't deal into the commercial part. These are the institutions which were licensed. They deal in it. But to add to what you said, we have done two things. One, I think all types of aircrafts are permitted to be leased from an IFFC lessor. So to answer your question, that is already permitted as a part of the regulatory framework that we have. Two, we have added now any other equipment, which means not only the aircraft, but any other, say for example, the ground support equipment has also been now leased from an IFFC lessor for the airlines, for the industry. And that's where we see that this, training center equipments and related stuff that can also be brought in under the framework that we now have. We got this addition added in few months back with the government, and it is now part of the regulatory structure permitted.
Yeah. Just to take the question forward, you mentioned about, so as a leasing company, we are definitely looking at FTOs, and I think at least we've been talking to 5 FTOs in order to look at the correct size or the correct aircraft that suits their requirement. But leasing is typically a process. It entails a lot of activities, something like the KYC of the person who's wanting into or becoming, wanting to lease the aircrafts. Then you have his financial strengths. So leasing has to undergo a certain process and a risk assessment portfolio where we do an analysis of what is the kind of risk that we can take when we are funding any aircraft. So yeah, we are very open, and we have been talking to a lot of FTOs in order to see how best, because we also understand that a lot of pilots get trained out of India, and then this is a way where, if not today, but tomorrow, we can definitely stop the currency going out of the country. Yeah, but leasing definitely is there, and as we work together, and just to point out that one of the important things that we need to do as part of growing in this whole ecosystem is also ensure the company's financial prudence, because I think the more stronger the balance sheet grows as we move forward. So when we are talking about and when we are evaluating your balance sheet in order to see the financial strength of your company, because that is the basis on which we kind of lease the aircrafts to you, we would want to understand that you have reported and you follow the normal principles laid down and you're profitable. The profit may be minimum or maximum, but there are certain thresholds that we look as part of financing activity. So yeah, FTO definitely, yes, it's part of the system. Dipesh also mentioned that there is no barrier in terms of who leases the aircraft, because it's an aircraft leasing, a very holistic word. So yeah, definitely, and as we move forward, I think we can work with anyone in the industry to see how we are able to lease aircrafts to them.
Thank you very much.
So this is an area which has also been looked at a few times. In fact, there has been some literature also out there we have put out recently in last few weeks on specifically catering to FTOs, because there is a challenge, you're right, specific to FTO market, but I think they're mainly driven by the concerns which Rashri has explained.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yeah, please. Divya, how much time do we have now? Because I'm just going on and taking questions. You can done? Can I take one last question or yeah? Please go ahead. Yeah.
My name is Ajay. So when you come to aircraft financing,
The question is for whom? Sorry.
Dipesh sir.
Okay, Deepesh.
When we come to aircraft financing, why can't we invest in the stocks and bonds? Because people are our investment. We do business for and service for people. Why can't we invest in that and gain our own investment instead of relating to foreign investments?
No, if I understood your question correctly, as to why can't you invest into the capital of a leasing firm? Is that what your question is, in the stock of the leasing company?
Yeah, stocks. Yeah.
So the IFFC entities, when you invest, you need a listed entities, right? These are not listed entities as on date. They all are public limited company but unlisted. Companies can bring in capital and invest into these entities, and that entity can then in turn do two things. One, buy the aircraft if they have enough capital with them as a part of an equity. Else they take the funding from the others to ensure that they are able to finance the aircraft.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your time and for this very interesting panel. I'm sure the audience found it quite enlightening too. Thank you for the audience for listening to us. Thank you. Thank you.